Hi, I'm Kevin, and welcome back to My Mentor. I have the great opportunity to talk to my good friend Wallace J Nichols, who is a marine biologist, ocean conservationist, and author of the number one New York Times bestseller, Bluemind. So welcome, Jay.
Right, thanks for inviting me over.
So you're 8, 9 years old catching turtles, and you're observing them, and you're in the water, in and around the water.
Yeah.
So is it also, and as we're speaking about in terms of communicating science now, at that time, you're 9-year-old Jay Nichols, and you're watching a turtle who's very internal, slow moving, those sorts of things. And so is there some other aspect of the turtle that you were drawn to, perhaps?
Yeah, that's where things get a little fuzzy. I don't know.
Yeah.
All I knew is that I really liked the way I felt when I was out on the water, near the water, in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Interacting with these animals in the water or
Mm-hmm.
near the water, and then thinking about that
Mm-hmm.
later and dreaming about it. That was like the best version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
The most fun, the most interesting,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to get back to that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it invaded my dreams, invaded my dry land time. If I was
Mm-hmm.
in the classroom, away from the water, that was kind of I liked that.
Yeah.
And so getting back to that feeling of interacting with a wild animal, not knowing what was going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
being out in nature, being in the water, just felt really good and very natural, and like the best version of myself. I was adopted, and the story that I had was that I was born, my mother gave me up and left, and I didn't know her. And then I meet these turtles, and that's what they do. They come up on the beach, they lay their eggs, they leave them, and then there's zero parental care.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were these parallel stories, and then that seemed to resonate on some level,
Totally, yeah.
created more empathy or more compassion, and that I somehow understood what they were going through as a kid.
That's fascinating.
The basic turtle story of abandonment,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of having had some bit of that in my own history. Mammalian versus reptilian abandonment are very, very different.
But
somehow something there, I guess.
You embodied a connection potentially with the turtle, and as you know, in that connection, you release oxytocin when you're caring for your loved ones, and so especially with the mother-child relationship. So you would say that you self-mentored. You were your own, trailblazer, and you found your own path.
With the help of books,
Mm-hmm.
I surrounded myself with books and then nature itself. Just
Mm-hmm.
going out and flipping rocks and jumping in the water and looking around, and
Mm-hmm.
that in a way was a kind of mentoring relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We don't typically describe our relationship with nature as one of mentorship,
Right.
but probably more than any other aspect of my life, that relationship is the most mentoring one I can look to.
So the sounds of the ocean crashing are
and the animals, and just going learning from them, just paying attention to what they're doing and thinking about it was probably more of a guide and more of an inspiration to keep going forward than any one person.
Yeah.
And I'd say most of the people were not helpful. And most of the animals were.
In what way?
You meet a turtle and it's super cool, and you put a number on it and you put it back in the water and it swims off, and then you just keep wondering about it, and it doesn't say marine biologist. No, what do you want to do that for? It just swims off, and then you get to think about it and wonder and pursue the idea, at least, of the turtle.
So it was almost a link into it's swimming out into a potential unknown territory, and then wondering if it's going to come back.
Yeah. Imagine if you had a human mentor who never used language. What would that mentorship relationship be like? They'd probably just show you places and things without speaking, without writing a word. And animals do that all the time. All the time.
So then, can you use that analogy to relate to your creative process and writing process, or coming up with the idea of Bluemind?
Yeah. Well, you know, the idea of Bluemind goes way back to childhood, love of water, and my earliest memories with my family and being in the water, you know, being alone underwater and just liking it, and knowing that just sort of innately that's where I wanted to be. And noticing that in other people as well. Was it like, oh, I'm the only person around who likes the water? Clearly not. There are lots of other people who felt the same way. And then as a young scientist, wondering more about that. But I as an undergrad studying biology, it was in Indiana, I was asked to give guitar lessons to a woman who had lost her memory in an accident. And she had been living in a nursing home for 15 years, and I was a sophomore in college and started giving her guitar lessons every Wednesday afternoon. And we spent 8 months doing that. And little by little, every time we played music together, she would access a different part of her formerly lost memories.
Interesting.
And that's what I thought, interesting. Super interesting. And we'd play John Denver, and then we'd stop and she'd start talking about something that was considered a lost memory. And then we wouldn't play any more music for the day, we'd just talk. And then I go back to campus and go, whoa, what just happened? And I go talk to my professors and they'd say, sorry, we don't know. Go over to that section of the library and dig around in the neuroscience journals and see what you find. And what I found was not much, because neuroscience and music wasn't really a thing in the mid-'80s. And so I just sort of sat with that idea. And again, Barbara was the woman's name. She had the intellect of a 6-year-old as she was, bringing her memories back and redeveloping. She was a mentor, quietly. She would never call herself a mentor, but she certainly was. She guided me into these thoughts about this whole realm of the human brain. And so that got lodged, that 8 months of working with Barbara got lodged in there. And then later on, I started connecting the dots and thinking, okay, well, if music can do that, and I love music, but for me, my music is the water. The water is what pulls me and has pulled my career forward. Maybe water does the same thing. And I was hoping that maybe there was a book about that in the library, so I looked for it, and it wasn't there. And then I was hoping we could get some other people to write it, and people like you and Melina maybe would write it, and I wasn't successful in doing that, so then it just kind of came down to writing it.
So this is okay. So this is fascinating, and I have two different streams that I want to go down. But the first one of the things that we do is we try and pull out and generate one of your superpowers in a brain structure that could be involved in that superpower. And hearing your different stories, the meditative aspect, really the self-monitoring, checking in with yourself as to what your passion is, what path you want to go down. It's really your, realizing your own motivation and pushing forward. And then also linking to nature, it all points to medial prefrontal cortex, which actually is involved in self-monitoring. It also, in expert meditators, which, as you're saying, the water was meditative for you. And also, I think being so internal and inside your own head, and which it seems like you really love just to sit down and read and be inside there, actually is deactivated in expert meditators versus novice meditators or people who don't meditate. And then the last piece that just came out a couple weeks ago in PNAS, as you know, is a very good scientific journal, actually going for a walk. So if you scan, put people in an fMRI scanner before, they go on a walk in nature, or after a walk in nature, you get less activation in the same structure, medial prefrontal cortex. And you don't see that deactivation in people when they go for a walk on an urban walk.
Right.
So you have this link between nature, meditative aspect, and then self monitoring and realizing what you want. And so I think your particular medial prefrontal cortex is just one of the things that's, linking, all of your different motivations and I think helped you come to this realization of Bluemind.
Yeah.
As a lesson too, I mean, just because something comes easy to you doesn't mean that you also didn't contribute to really working at it, shaping it, and making it your own, right? So it's not like it, was just there when you were 8 and you never had to do anything to improve it. You worked on building the knowledge set, making the links yourself across the different fields. And to me, that's just part of the superpower is first the baseline that you had this ability, but then recognizing it, crafting it and shaping it, especially without someone telling you, this is your, this is what you're good at, this is a superpower that you should pursue. You noticed that yourself and you followed it. You followed your gut, right? Is that an accurate?
Yeah, and I think it's that building the confidence to follow your gut is a big part of it, because there are all kinds of reasons not to, whether it's your parents or your professors or society, your colleagues, your friends. Following your gut is a dangerous thing to do, or sometimes creates conflict, or it's not always supported. Not everybody around you says, "Oh, your gut, yeah, follow it. Yeah, good idea." A lot of times they're saying, "No, don't. Follow the rules. Not your gut." And to be able to say, "I think I'll go with my gut. I think I'll go with this idea that is new, that doesn't fit the rules, that breaks the rules." That's tough. It's, for a young person to go out alone, basically, and say, "Okay, mom, dad, professors, friends, loved ones, I'm going over here." And when you do, you're sometimes left alone over there, and sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes it does.
One of the connections that we have, I don't know if you know this about me, but now it's ironic that we're both sitting here communicating and talking, but I stuttered when I was little.
Right.
And I know that you also stuttered as well, and now we're making a career out of
speaking to each
other, communicating science, communicating about Bluemind.
By the way, you've handled your stuttering really well so far.
So have you. Beautifully. So for me, as a motivator, or I use that as a motivator, because to me, when I was younger and stuttered and people would call me stupid, and I would just shut down and be quiet, that helped me actually get into and understand the way that I thought, understanding words, how words worked, and it made me very careful, not only to relearn how to speak without the stutter and partial lisp, but to pick the words. And I would start, to see the words, see the sentences. And now when I write papers, when I write poetry, that to me, that what I think most people would think about as obviously a big negative, was a foundation for building. I think both writing and speaking in a simple communication fashion. So did you have that experience, or?
Yeah, I think that the desire to not speak led me to read and write more, and to work on other nonverbal ways of communicating. Also, to be quiet and just listen. And so I remember being asked, why I was so shy, and thinking but not saying, "I'm not shy. I'm just paying attention."
I had the same experience.
And that became, part of who I was. Even though I didn't express it verbally, I just would think it, or they, I'd shrug. And occasionally you meet someone who got it, who knew what was going on, and And then again, it's that nonverbal communication. So if, that question again, if you have a mentor who never, who truly was a mentor, but they never spoke or wrote a word to you.
Yeah.
They mentored you without language.
Yeah.
What would that feel like? What would that look like? Human or non-human? And I think that probably also connects to that nonverbal phase of not wanting to speak.
Yeah.
Out of fear of embarrassment or not being able to communicate very clearly. And then getting over it for me was not through therapy. It was through just practice. I didn't get therapy for stutter. I got therapy for other kinds of speech issues, but not for stuttering. And when I decided that I wanted to be able to speak better publicly and not make everybody uncomfortable when I did so, I started giving turtle talks to kindergartners.
Oh, yeah?
And I had my slide carousel, and I'd go into these kindergartens and, plug in the slide machine, and kindergartners were very forgiving with the stutter.
Yeah.
And I did dozens, 100 talks to kids about turtles.
Wow.
And developed a strategy, or, an approach to not stutter, which was basically when I felt it coming, which I got better at sensing, I'd pause and just say nothing and let it kind of subside. And I still do that. The unusual mid-sentence pauses that people think are, very nice and contemplative and a nice speaking style. Little do they know it's just a control the stutter mechanism. But then you get better at sensing the stutter, the stammer coming, and really not wanting it to come out.
Yeah.
And so there's this, the negative feedback of making that set of sounds that's uncomfortable, because you can see how uncomfortable the listener gets or the listeners. And then when you see how uncomfortable you're making them, you stammer or stutter more.
Yeah.
And it's this horrible negative feedback loop that you just want to avoid.
Yeah.
And so when you find that you can sense it coming, that you can stop.
Yeah.
Stopping mid-sentence is so much better, and saying nothing is so much better than making an unintelligible sound.
Yeah. So did you actually know that in your ability, or your want and desire to actually do that, and then coming up with that solution, so it was actually changing your brain?
Yeah, rewiring.
Rewiring. So in stuttering, in people who stutter, the right hemisphere is actually, especially in frontal and the temporal lobe, is actually more active than in non-stutterers. Right. But as you learn to deal with stuttering, and you actually have that change in how you move your mouth to speak, that overcompensation of the right hemisphere goes down, and actually the left frontal gyrus actually increases in volume, and it begins to then support that change of the overcompensation. And it's known that after therapy, or there in your own preventive measures, right, you likely did the same thing, and that's just a perfect example of that. We're not victims of our own brain. We're not stuck with our own brain, right? You can actually change it and be proactive about it. So I think that's one of your superpowers. Yeah. I mean, I really do think you came up with it yourself. Right. And I think that's a general feature of you, is that you have that ability to know what you want and have that instinct. You followed that instinct, right? What was right for you, what worked for you. And that's a real, most people don't have that. That's, I hope you know that. I mean, that's that's very specific to you. Yeah.
And I think to quietly figure out, an approach and then to work through it is without necessarily human support.
Right.
I think that's I think I can look and see that. But it reminded me of it turns out there's this little short video or news clip from Indiana when I gave guitar lessons to Barbara, that I never saw it until much later, and the archivist at the university I went to dug it up and put it on YouTube. But when I saw it, it reminded me that when I did an interview with this news person, I stuttered through the whole thing.
Really?
and I talked to the reporter, and I said, or the cameraman, I said, you know, that was terrible. I don't know if any of that's going to be useful. And he said, oh, don't worry, we can edit out the stuttering. And I remember when he said that, I was just like, wow, you can edit out the stuttering. I wish I could do that.
Oh, wow.
And then, you know, jumping forward, seeing that clip, they edited out the stuttering, and I sound pretty good. But I can see where it was. And it's just this little time capsule from then. And it doesn't, I kind of wish I had the uncut version to compare. But I remember I didn't want to do an interview. I didn't. We were just doing guitar lessons, and they showed up with the news team. And I said, I don't want to talk. And the cameraman said, yeah, don't worry, we'll edit out the bad parts. And they did.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So, yeah.
So even just seeing that clip, and then, I mean, right there you have that multi-sensory integration, right? You see the solution, like you can edit it out, right? You see how it might happen, and then in your brain you could, you know, see linking the mouth movements to the sounds and how to edit those out.
Right.
And that's just amazing.
And even I can remember having forgotten that entire episode and that news report even existed. When I saw it, I could, it all came back up, and I could feel that those words that I had spoken at 19 years old.
Wow.
And I could feel where I did in fact stutter. And it was all, you know, the memory of that interaction was there, and then the feeling of where I would have stuttered then was still there, but then the edited version didn't include that. So pretty interesting.
That's crazy.
So
I think your the combination of your superpowers is really that, you know, internal state or internal control of your self-regulation, internal understanding, the meditative aspect, and then also the multisensory integration and your ability to really know and understand you and your brain, and then to actually manipulate it in a way that makes these connections and then communicate it to people in a beautiful and understandable way based off of the fact that you know what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you do it, and you make the links, and you work on it until it becomes what does work. And I think that's beautiful.
Well, the way you describe that, I think one of the reasons why I can explain things in a way that people can understand is because I'm also just trying to understand too. So I'm a hair in front of, if I'm the explainer, I'm just an inch in front of the people I'm explaining it to, but slightly, and so it's accessible. And I think a lot of scientists get so far ahead of the people they're speaking to that they can't reach back and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what I'm trying to explain. They're just way out, so far ahead. And I always feel like I'm just a tiny bit in front of even if it's a kindergarten, I just know a little more than they do. So they can relate, or I'm just getting over the stuttering thing. So, they're able to relate to you as sort of a broken kid.
Yeah. Well, Jay, this has been a beautiful conversation. We're unfortunately out of time, but I think just the conversation itself was just a beautiful illustration. And thank you for being so open about that. You really are not stuck with your brain. You can change it, and in a beautiful way. So thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
See you next time.